to Menopause Mindset Monday. My name is Sally Garozzo, and a very warm welcome to you. If you're watching live, a very warm welcome. If you're catching the replay, another warm welcome. So today's topic is called self-betrayal. What is it and how can we fix it? And I think it's a sensitive topic. It's a pertinent topic, especially with women going through their menopause and men as well going through their midlife transition, because when we're going through a midlife transition, it tends to require that we begin to shift the balance from thinking about others to thinking about ourselves and actually starting to put our own needs first. So let's start with a few examples of self-betrayal. And you can let me know if you've got any examples of where you might betray yourself, or if you see it in other people, or you might not know. So this might be completely new to you. And if it is, that's absolutely fine. It's all part of the growth process. So here's a little example of self-betrayal. You are with a group of friends and you're trying to decide where to go for dinner, and everybody is afraid to be the first one to sort of pipe up and suggest where to go. And somebody asks you, have you got somewhere in mind that you'd like to go? And you go, oh, you know what, I'm fine with whatever, anybody else chooses, or whatever the group consensus is, that's fine. So other people follow your lead, and, this happens for a while and everyone's kind of getting a bit frustrated perhaps. And then someone says, I'll tell you what, let's just go for Chinese. And everyone agrees and they follow along. But here's the problem. You don't like Chinese food. You don't like it for whatever reason. You don't like the taste of it. You don't like the MSG. You can never find anything that you particularly like. You always feel hungrier afterwards. But now you feel like you've got no choice. You've got to go along with it because you didn't speak up to begin with, and you're kicking yourself. You're acting normal on the outside, but inside maybe you're feeling resentful, or maybe you're feeling like, I've just been forced to go somewhere that I don't particularly enjoy. So that's a kind of typical example of self-betrayal, but there are many other examples as well. Another example is when you and I see mums doing this a lot. They allow a budget for their kids to go for swimming, for ballet, for karate, but they don't allow themselves to have a budget for a nutritional therapist or a personal trainer, for example. Another way that we might betray ourselves is that we might say yes to a piece of cake or something sweet that's being offered us when actually we really don't want it. Perhaps we're full, or perhaps we're not eating sugar at the moment, but we don't want to upset or offend that person's hospitality. It might be self-betrayal might look like, spending fortunes on travel to go and see a family member who's actually really toxic and quite negative. And when you leave that family member, you always come away from there feeling, physically, mentally drained and quite bummed out. Another way that we might betray ourselves is you don't speak up in meetings. You've got a ton of great ideas, but you feel inwardly that your ideas are not very good and they're not valid. Excuse me. Number 6 might be that you're with a group, a gaggle of girlfriends, or the opposite sex or whatever, and people are engaging in gossip and you don't find it particularly comfortable, but you engage anyway because you want to feel part of the crowd, but you don't necessarily agree with what you're doing. You don't necessarily agree with the gossip, and you feel a bit sad that they're bringing this person down, but you do it anyway. Another way we might betray ourselves typically would be staying in a relationship that is toxic or not really going anywhere, and we're just sort of falling out of love with this person. And we stay in these relationships because we don't believe that we're lovable or that we'll ever find another person. And finally, the final way that I've got that we criticize, that we act out self-betrayal is through self-criticism. And I think this is the one that stings the most. And this one tends to be the most harmful from my point of view and in what I see in my clients, especially my clients who have depression. So self-criticism and talking to yourself in a way that you would never talk to a friend, saying things like, I'm stupid, I'm fat, I'm ugly, no one's going to love me, nothing ever works out for me, love is not available to me, I need to be rich, beautiful, handsome for anyone to ever fall in love with me, and things like that. And those words are really embedded. Maybe you don't even know that you're saying those things to yourself. Maybe they're very, very subconscious. So the essence of it is self-betrayal is really about going against your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. Your actions, your words are going against your physical, mental, and emotional well-being in order to keep the peace or make someone else happy or make someone else feel more at ease, or just because it's what you are familiar with. So let me know if you recognize any of these traits within yourself. If you're watching the replay, let me know. Or if you see these traits in other people. And the thing is, we all do it. We've all done this. I know I've done this. I'm sure you've done this as well. And the thing is, it's not our fault because it tends to come from childhood programming. But once you start to recognize where you betray yourself, there's a real invitation right there to start taking steps that move you out of self-betrayal and victimhood into, the adult role, the responsibility, being the responsible adult to yourself, so that you can start to be kind to yourself, and so that you can start to be the kind of person who always acts in a way that is authentic, congruent, and in alignment with yourself. That way you avoid all of that resentment. So I want to just talk about for a moment why self-betrayal is not your fault. I think this is super, super interesting. Just trying to see if there's anyone watching. So let's look, where does it start on our timeline and where does it come from? Because knowing this part actually really helps us heal from it. So self-betrayal is actually a coping mechanism, and it's an adaptive response that we learn completely automatically in childhood from parents who might have disapproved of something that we might have said or that we might have done. And the reason we adopt this self-betrayal coping mechanism totally unconsciously is to gain more love, more approval, and more acceptance from our caregivers. And when we're children, we absolutely have to do this. We are programmed to do this because our survival depends on our loved ones approving of us, taking care of us, and meeting our needs. So when we are children, and a parent says or does something that translates as, I disapprove of you. For example, you're too sensitive, you're too selfish, you're too messy, you're too disruptive, you're too unsociable, you're too much of a show off, you're too clingy, whatever it is that's going on, basically you're too whatever. We can end up feeling shame when those feelings are not acknowledged by a parent or a caregiver. We can end up feeling shame around those feelings, whether it's, that we're sensitive, we're clingy, we're disruptive, we're unsociable, or overly noisy or whatever. What happens is we then lock that part of ourselves away. And we make a promise to ourselves that we will never put ourselves in that position again where that feeling of shame could arise or come up, because it's just too painful for us to feel that. Shame is so painful. We do massive away froms shame. Yeah. So then what happens is, let me just go back here. Sorry. feeling of shame will ever come up again because it's too painful, but also because we need to have our parents' approval. Our life depends on our parents' approval. Then as we get older, needing our parents' approval becomes needing our boss's approval or our friends' approval or our colleagues' approval, etc. So then we go through our whole life not being authentic. We go through our whole life not being the person that we really are because we've quashed those qualities that our parents didn't really acknowledge, that, our sensitivity or our disruptiveness, our rebelliousness, or our selfishness, or should I say self-fullness, or our introvertedness. And then this becomes a very, very familiar pattern that becomes perpetuated and embedded within us as we then play that out unconsciously all through our adult life. Hence, self-betrayal. It's actually really sad when you think about it. It's, when you really connect to the idea that we go against our own needs, it's really, really sad. So there are other ways to learn self-betrayal, very interestingly. If a parent denies our reality, so we might instinctively know our mother is upset because she's at the end of her tether, or she's, overwhelmed, but dad dismisses it as mum being hormonal or crazy or just like, grumpy. And, dad might say, don't worry about mum, she'll be fine. It's just PMS or whatever. But we know there's something wrong with mum. So we can feel it. As children, we might not have the words, but we can feel everything. That's all we've got. And so this creates an imprint of conflict, which can end up creating a lot of anxiety because we feel there's something wrong with mum, but dad's denying it. So we feel there's something wrong, but dad's denying it. So it's like, can we really trust our feelings? So that's when we create that imprint, I can't trust my feelings, and we never develop our intuition. Another way that kids end up betraying themselves as adult is becoming something that mum or dad wants them to be, like a lawyer or a doctor, when actually the child wants to be something creative, like a ballerina or a photographer or a sex therapist or something. Probably a bit too grown up, that, but yeah, you get the idea. And I do see this a lot, particularly in some cultures. So at the root of self-betrayal are many different beliefs, and those beliefs are things like I can't trust myself, I can't trust my internal emotional and mental landscape, I must be fundamentally flawed, there's something wrong with me, I can't put my needs first, everyone else needs to be happy before me, if I put my needs first then I won't be loved. And as I said before, this problem often comes up at midlife and menopause because in order to get through midlife and menopause successfully, it does require a bit of a shift. This is the midlife crisis, because out of crisis is born change. So we have to start putting ourselves first. We have to start looking after our health, our sleep, our nutrition, our relationships, our finances. And if we continue to betray ourselves, we become more and more and more and more desperate and unhappy. So this self-betrayal carries a massive cost. And here are some of the things that it can lead to. So we can end up, as I mentioned before, we can end up losing touch with our own intuition. We can lose touch with our inner voice and our moral compass often. We can become chronically indecisive because we don't know ourselves. We don't really value our feelings or our own decisions because they're still tied up with parental approval. And in fact, one of my clients could never make a decision without doing this form of counting. It was like an OCD. And so before every time she chose something to wear, every time she put makeup on, every time she chose a song to sing, she would have to do this counting. And when we regressed, it turned out that her mum was very controlling and tried to make a lot of her decisions for her. So the way that she felt was never really validated growing up. So it's very sad. So the consequence of self-betrayal is that we can lose self-respect, we can lose self-confidence as well, which can lead to depression, because if we lose self-respect and self-confidence, our inner language is going to be quite dark, quite negative, and quite self-destructive. We can develop a tendency towards dishonesty, outwardly and inwardly. We can develop a tendency towards inauthenticity because we don't know how to be ourselves. Like, what does that look like? And this is because we're not working with ourselves. We end up kind of following the crowd. And then ultimately self-sabotage can kick in because of these deep seated beliefs that I am undeserving. You know, if I'm feeling that my parents don't approve when we're younger, if we feel like our parents don't approve, we create these beliefs that go something like, that must mean I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, then I'm bad. And if I'm bad, then I'm undeserving. So, you know, it's quite helpful to look at the underlying language and actually peel some of the layers back so that we can see what's going on there. Yeah, we can also become resentful. And we can also allow others to determine the trajectory of our lives. It's like we give our power away. We don't realize that we have the power. We can decide how we want to go. Often we just kind of bump up against things and jobs and small opportunities rather than carving out what it is that we really want for ourselves. So it's like caveat here. I just want to mention a couple of things about self-betrayal. Because self-betrayal is not the same as compromising. Sometimes we do have to compromise in our relationships and in our friendships, and compromising because we want the overall relationship to improve. And I think that's okay. We do need to compromise sometimes in our friendships and our relationships. But if you find yourself compromising all the time, there might be some kind of self-betrayal going on. And living in this way, living in a way that is authentic, so not betraying yourself, it doesn't mean that you have to be argumentative or constantly playing devil's advocate all the time, or it doesn't mean that you have to be a control freak or a perfectionist. It just means that you respect yourself. It means that you have boundaries, and you also have respect for others too, because you just want to be honest and let people know. It's actually easier, isn't it? If you think about that first scenario, it's easier just to come up and say, yeah, I fancy Italian, or I want to go to the vegan health food cafe because I'm not eating gluten at the moment. People go, okay, that's fine, you know, whatever. Some people might not agree, but that's, you know, can't please everybody. So yes, it means that you respect yourself. It means that you have boundaries, and other people will see that within you, and hopefully they will respect you for your boundaries. Yeah. So how do we heal from self-betrayal then? So I've got 3 things that we need to do. So number 1 is we do need to recognize it, because if we don't recognize it, then we can't heal from it. We've got to illuminate it. We've got to bring it up and out. So this requires a level of self-awareness. Hi, whoever you are watching, giving me a thumbs up. Can't see who you are. Sorry. It's really annoying that I can't see this. Right, so number 1, recognize where we might be betraying ourselves, and this does require a level of self-awareness. I thought it might be you, TJ. Yeah. So often, we might not even know where we're betraying ourselves, even if we're quite self aware. So this happened to me recently. I didn't realize that I was betraying my body's need for healthy food because I got so sucked into a work rabbit hole. I ended up eating or just cooking freezer meals, not even cooking, just putting in the oven freezer meals. I mean, they were sort of high value, good quality freezer meals, but even so, slightly higher in salt and ingredients that I didn't quite recognize. So even if you do have a very high level of self-awareness, we can still get sucked into self-betrayal. It takes a certain level of awareness. So I'd like to invite you to maybe have a little look at your life over the next week or so and just go, where am I not actually working for myself here? Where am I putting my needs last? So this could be with your sleep habits, not going to bed on time. It could be not eating the right foods. I mean, cooking is actually very grounding, and this is something that I've realized. I have got myself back on track now, thank goodness. It could be, not taking time to relax, not making the right investments in yourself, feeling like you could do with some kind of support, but not actually investing in any kind of support. It could be, perpetuating negativity. So having this cup half empty approach, or not even having a cup. It could be putting yourself at risk, driving really, really fast, tailgating people, or rushing around and, not being mindful with your tasks and ending up having accidents, things like that. Self-betrayal could be just going along with the crowd. It could be, not starting that business that your heart really, really wants to start, but you're not going along with yourself because you don't believe in yourself. So where are you? And I think that the reason why I like the word self-betrayal is because it's very, very impactful. When we say the word betray, we usually think of a betrayal. So a wife having an affair or a husband having an affair, and there's that sense of, oh my God, how could they do that? That's awful. And so when we think about it like that, there's like, words carry weight, don't they? They carry meaning. And so when we look at betrayal like that in an external context, but then when we transfer it to us, it's quite heavy. It's quite heavy. But I think it needs to be heavy so that we will actually do something about it. So number 2 then, to start to heal this self-betrayal, is to really get clear on what you want to do instead based on what's going to work for you. Pardon me. So this is about knowing what your values are. What do you stand for? What are your standards? Is Chinese food a no, or is it a yes? Is gossip a no, or is it a yes, or is it a maybe, depending on the context? If you're not clear, then your mind doesn't really have a clear direction. It doesn't really know what is expected of it, and it needs that. And if it doesn't have a clear idea of where it's going, it just sort of wafts, or it can be like an unruly toddler. So it's actually very useful to know what your boundaries are, what your values are, what your standards are. And I would advise raising your standards as well. Right, yes. Often this can be mapped out and journaled upon. This is a really great thing to do at the weekend if you've got nothing else to do. Grab your fancy journal or just a piece of paper, or do this online or your phone, and journal it. Create 2 columns. Where do I betray myself, and how do I actually want to respond instead to these scenarios? And when I work with people with rapid transformational therapy, I always ask them, what do you want? Because knowing what you want actually creates a more successful session. If you don't know what you want, I actually can't give you a session. So knowing what you want is something that we really do have to get clear on. And often this gets clearer through life. You know, when I see people in their 20s, often they, have just got themselves into really sticky situations where things are just not working for them. Because often when we're in our 20s, we're trying to navigate our moral compass. We're not quite sure where our edges are. We're not quite sure what we feel, think, or believe. We're still fresh out of childhood. And then, we making all our mistakes in our 20s and 30s. And then in our 40s and 50s, we're the product of those mistakes. And we're trying to go, you know what, I don't ever want to make those mistakes ever again. They're not me anymore. And I want something better for myself. I actually want to stop putting myself last and start putting myself first. So number 3 then is really just taking action. And this is where people can become resistant because it's difficult and it requires a consistent level of discomfort that a lot of people are not willing to move into. And it's only until you're ready to move into that discomfort that transformation usually takes place. So the narrative tends to be, I know I shouldn't eat cakes. My body doesn't want it, but I can't stop because it's too difficult to stop. Or I know I should put my point of view across, but I can't because I'm scared of rejection. I know I should leave this relationship, but I can't because I'm scared of loneliness or never, finding another mate. So here's my response to that. I've got 2 things I want to say to that. Number 1, you've got to really, really, really want the change. So much so that you are prepared to feel the discomfort of doing the new behavior, even though you don't really want to do it. That the want to change, the desire to change, to experience something different has got to be way, way, way more than the suffering that you're experiencing by staying where you are. So this was my number 2. The suffering of self-betrayal has to get to a point where it's worse than the suffering required to move into the stretch of doing the new, different behavior. I hope this is making sense, because anything that we do that's new, there's a stretch involved, there's a discomfort involved. And so the suffering of staying where you are has got to be greater than the suffering required to do the different thing. So, many transformational attempts have failed because those aspects have not been in place. The want, the desire to change have not been in place, or there's been subconscious reasons, or there's been secondary gain. Often we can gain from self-betrayal. We gain by being in our comfort zone. It's comfortable. We might gain by safety. We might gain by how would self-betrayal meet a need? We might get attention from it. We might feel protected by it. It might be preventing us from moving into the stretch. So that's secondary gain. And I do something called role function purpose under hypnosis, which is very, very revealing and explain, that it's not me doing it, it's the client doing it. They're really having a good dig around in their subconscious and finding the reasons why this self-betrayal or whatever issue it is that they've come with is there. And why is it so resistant? Like, why is it not budging? Why doesn't it want to move? And usually it's because there's some kind of secondary gain. Okay, so this is where rapid transformational therapy can help. Because during RTT, we access the power of the imagination and the visualization. So When we are in our lives, when we're living our lives, we're observing what is all around us. And when we're observing what is all around us, that belief in what is gets reinforced day by day by day by day. So what we want to do is actually, in order to transform, we need to shift our awareness away from what we are observing, because that keeps us stuck. It keeps us perpetuated here, because there's so much evidence as to why life sucks, why we can't get a lover or a mate, why we can't earn any more money. So what we need to start doing is moving into our imagination. And that's really hard to do if you're so practiced at sitting in what you're observing. So RTT can help you because we do access the power of visualization and imagination. And as we start to do this, we can come away from what is observed, the humdrum of what is, towards what is possible. And then we start to feel more hope and motivation. So we immobilize ourselves. We mobilize out of hopelessness into hope that things might shift. Then once we feel more hopeful, we feel more motivated. So come moving out of self-betrayal is also really recognizing all of these aspects. You know, why? Why did you end up with an imprint that says I'm not enough? Really looking at that. And that is the phenomenal thing about rapid transformational therapy, because under hypnosis, we can do that. We can look at what happened to you to create this belief, I'm not enough. We go back to 2, 3, 4 scenes in your childhood where you learnt this. We really explore it. We give that pain a voice so that it can speak, so that it can feel acknowledged. And often there are tears, but they're tears of letting go. They are tears of joy, of release. And it's such a wonderful thing, because when you realize, when you understand where it comes from, you then have a decision. Oh, I don't have to believe that anymore. I can see where this habit, this pattern come from. It's not my fault. Anyone would have done the same. Any child, any teenager in my position, with having had this experience, would have done the same thing. And you know, I see it day in, day out. I've seen it in my life. I've seen it in my partner's life, my parents' lives, my clients' lives. Different scenes, different scenarios where the child was not heard, the child was not listened to. Feelings and emotions were shunned, were brushed to one side like they were just a piece of dirt on the floor. And, you know, that's not even our parents' fault either, because they had no internet. They didn't know how to do things differently. But we do. We have an internet. We can choose to work on ourselves to shift these unhelpful patterns that are keeping us stuck, keeping us sick, keeping us in really toxic environments or toxic relationships. So very, very important that we do take responsibility once we have become aware. It's not your fault that you betrayed yourself, but it is your responsibility to now look at why. Why did you do that? And how can you free yourself from it? So if you are interested in rapid transformational therapy, it's a 2-hour process, 2 to 3 hour process sometimes, that's done under hypnosis. We go back to those scenes, we look at those scenes, we do something called role function purpose, where we look at the role of the issue or the condition that you've come with, and we look at what you are getting from it, so the secondary gain, and then we give you a voice. So the transformational work is really about the new language, the new imagery. We can talk to your cells to get them to behave differently. We can talk to your hormones. We can dial up those sex hormones for fertility. We can dial down those stress hormones. So it really is a wonderful way of transforming your mindset, your and your the way that your cells function. We use feeling rather than logic. So in sort of traditional talking therapy, it's quite logic-based, but in RTT, on anything that's done under hypnosis, really accesses the power of the subconscious mind. Imagery is turned up, suggestibility is turned up, and the feeling state is turned up as well. And we utilize that feeling state in order to leverage change. So there we go. So for those of you interested in how much RTT is, let me just show you. I think it's that one, is it? Yeah, there we go. It works best when you invest. In my experience, RTT works best when you get extra support, and that's why I've put together these packages to ensure that you get the changes that you need. So you can work with me for 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months. 1 month is popular for people who have already done some work on themselves, but who need a bit of a jump start to help them clear a block that's holding them back. All RTT sessions come with your own uniquely crafted 20-minute hypnosis script creation and professional recording set to binaural music, which I do myself. 30 days WhatsApp support, which is very, very useful for, journaling, bouncing ideas backwards and forwards, celebrating your wins, working through challenges. And you also get 2 30-minute private coaching calls as well, plus access to my book recommendation list and all my other bits and bobs, other training library. So 1 month is $397, 2 months 719, and 3 months 1041, and you can see how much you save there. So 2 months, people who work with me for 2 months are usually popular for people who have done some work on themselves but not necessarily loads. Great for when your issue is a bit sticky and you've got some of that self-sabotage that I spoke about before. And then you've got the 3 months, which is popular for people who have deep-rooted trauma to clear and who are at the beginning of their journey. So 3 months is basically 3 RTT sessions. 2 months is 2 RTT sessions, and the WhatsApp support lasts a bit longer. If you work with me, obviously for 2 months, you get 60 days WhatsApp support, 4 coaching calls. And if you work with me for 3 months, you get 90 days WhatsApp support and 8 coaching calls. So it's quite a lot. Payment plans are available and reduced rates for concessions, including people financially affected by the pandemic. Please just reach out and ask. So thank you so much for being here with me this evening. I hope you've learned something. I hope you've learned a thing or two about this idea of self-betrayal today. I think it's very, very important. And do let me know what your thoughts are. I'll be very happy to have a conversation with you about this in any way, shape or form. I always love hearing about client insights, client realizations, or any questions that you've got about anything. That's fine. So thank you so much for being here with me today and sharing this part of your day with me. It means a lot. I'm always here for you, ready and willing to support you if you need me. So just reach out and ask. So lots of love, everyone. I will see you back here next week. Same place, same time, 6 o'clock next Monday. Bye.